We are group three, Garrett, Elizabeth, Marcella, and Mary Kate. And we're doing chapter seven, RTI and MTSS. So for question one, describe the purpose and background of response to intervention. Response to intervention is used to help students with different learning needs, reduce disability identification, and provide evidence for the appropriate identification of learning disabilities. The goal of RTI is to improve instruction in schools for students with learning disabilities and to further integrate general education and special education. RTI comes from previous special education legislation, such as ESSA, ESEA, NCLB, and IDEA. Um, RTI typically consists of evidence-based practices to help students with learning disabilities learn better, early intervention to prevent school failure, and monitoring of progress. RTI typically consists of three levels, but this could vary by individual school.
All right. Now, through RTI, there is multiple tiers which a student can go through. And essentially, the higher the tier, the more individualized instruction you're going to receive as a student. So, tier one starts out as like effective instruction in the general education classroom. So, again, it's in the general education classroom with all students, and the content is being taught by a general education teacher. It is scientifically based instruction that's given, and scientifically based instruction is basically research that has many procedures, and it's experimental designs that are reliable and provide valid measures. And this research has been reviewed by professionals for validity. Differentiated instruction occurs to accommodate students, and additionally, there are screening measures to take place every 1 to 2 weeks. Students' performances are students' performance standards are state and district benchmarks that measure what grade level they're performing at. Despite being in general education classrooms, tier one instruction differs as it's not like regular general education instruction. It is a step above that. And changes include universal screening and progress monitoring according to common standards, instruction, intervention, and assessment. And so the next one's tier two, which kind of is like the most like involved and detailed heavy tier. It's a step above tier one. So any student who is a treatment resistor or who does not respond to intervention moves on to tier two. There, it takes place in small groups of students who exhibit difficulty in the same subject area, and instruction appears more intensive. It's given in a resource room or another part of the general education classroom with a specialized instructor. And it has the same scientifically based instruction as tier one, but it has specialized materials, and progress monitoring and instruction is more frequent. It occurs multiple times a week, and progress monitoring in this tier determines if a student can return to tier one instruction. Instruction is more explicit in presentation. It provides multiple examples, immediate feedback, and highly encourages student responses. And tier two occurs over a 9 to 12 week period, and towards the end of instruction, there's several choices like an instructor can make about the student. So if a student's progress in tier two is on par, they can resume it instruction in tier one. And then if a student is making progress but not as like hit their goal, they can maintain two-tier intervention and possibly revisit the idea of tier one instruction after this tier two intervention continues for a little while longer. And then if the student shows no progress, then they should move to tier three, which then they will be given a referral for special education services. And finally, tier three, it's individualized intensive instruction. So it takes place when no response was given in the other two tiers. This instruction occurs in smaller groups, and depending on the state, this could possibly require a special education service or referral where the student will likely be pulled out of general education classrooms for a certain period of time. Instruction's more frequent and takes place over a longer period of time than tier two. And instruction will be direct and focused on specific goals like task analysis and strategy instruction. And you can kind of see that, especially with like IEPs, if a student is referred to special education instruction. And tier three involves frequent progress monitoring, especially after being placed in special education. It's a part of the IDEA requirements, and progress monitoring assists in assessing if instruction needs to be altered further.
So for question three, this was about fidelity of implementation. And so fidelity of implementation is the degree to which instruction is delivered in the way it was intended. And this is predicated on the idea of using instructional methods and interventions that are evidence-based, meaning it is of little use to implement a treatment or intervention with fidelity that is not known to be effective to begin with. The three dimensions important to fidelity of implementation as defined by Mallard and Johnson are one, the method of validating fidelity, two, the frequency of fidelity evaluations, and three, the support systems needed to implement the program with fidelity. Establishing fidelity of implementation involves creating a task list for fidelity of implementation procedures, continuous staff professional development, and data collection system with clear measures for data collection. The three types of fidelity of implementation are one, direct assessment measures, and this is observing the teacher in action to see if implementation is being carried out as intended. Two, indirect assessment measures. This is teacher self-reports of implementation, more general rating scales, teacher interviews, and permanent products of teacher or student work. And the third is treatment manuals. This is written guides that outline how interventions should be implemented that serve as a reference for teachers.
Okay, so question 4 is about screening. And so school-wide screening allows educational professionals to understand the overall population of their student body. It's a snapshot to the bigger picture. Screening allows educators to determine what the overall population needs, and it also determines which students need more support. Good screening assessment highlights the sensitivity and specificity of students. Sensitivity highlights the students who need help, while specificity assists educational professionals in determining particular setbacks, even if a student is performing well. Screenings are also highly beneficial in ruling out students who are inaccurately determined as having academic troubles. It also assists educators in identifying students who fell underneath the radar and need more help than they let on. In my experience, students in both middle school and high school are able to mask learning deficiencies or setbacks. Screenings are important because it allows districts to determine what services are needed. With proper screenings, districts can receive proper funding and therefore the students receive the services that are needed. Doing screenings multiple times a year assists in accurate findings. So then there's some examples there as well, just for some of the screening assessments that were in the textbook. So gray, oral reading tests, dynamic indicators of basic early literacy or DIBELS, and then oral reading fluency test.
So one of our competencies is number 5, promote asset-based perspectives about differences. And then for each of the letters, we found a little example from our chapter on how it relates. Starting with the first one, with A, we could start with diverse learning in tier 1 and make sure that it's priority. And then B, communicate with families in the way that they would prefer. And then C, teachers should ensure fidelity in their teaching practices. They should look up at their own teaching and see if it is effective rather than blaming the child. D, ensure students aren't being targeted or misdiagnosed with proper screening. And then E, allow students to be in control of their own journey. They should be the drivers of their own future. And competency 5 on the right side, you can see what each one is for each letter.
We also did the same thing for competency 6. So for A, if a child is progressed towards tier 3 intervention, more often than not, they are referred to for special education services. This applies to competency 6A because in order for the district to complete a special education evaluation, they need to contract the student's parents to gain their consent for an evaluation. By giving consent, one can see how a parent, no matter their differences, wants the best for their child. And then for B, collaborating with families in a way that they prefer if requesting a referral. So, for example, what we saw with Ramir and Tamir, and how Ramir may not have been, the teachers could have interacted with her in a different way. And then for C, make parents a part of the RTI process and keep them informed for consistency for the child and their progression towards their goals.
For letter D, an example of this is families from different cultures have a variety of approaches to many things in life. Teachers in schools who do not respect or embrace cultural differences might encourage a indifferent approach towards school officials. Whereas when schools embrace cultural differences, this promotes a welcoming environment for students and families of different cultures. For letter E, as with special education referral in general, BIPOC, multilingual families and families living in poverty and with varying sexual orientations and gender identities may be incorrectly represented and not receive the correct RTI. And for letter F, in Tamir's case study, school outreach and establishing trust with Tamir's mother, Ramir, is important in making sure his IEP is implemented and that he is making adequate progress on both his short and long-term goals.